Yes, you read that right. One man inside the US government could be setting up the biggest Bitcoin pump in history. And this isn't clickbait. It's bigger than most people realize. I'm talking about the US Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnik. I'm talking about his web of connections that puts him right in the middle of a shadow network of whales holding nearly 600,000 Bitcoin. So why is someone with that much power building a $2 billion Bitcoin machine? And what does Tether have to do with all of this? And is the US government actually planning a sovereign wealth fund to back all of this up?
마크 모스는 미국의 금융 전문가이자 경제순환, 금융 역사, 중앙은행 정책, 비트코인과 암호화폐를 중심으로 일반 대중이 복잡한 경제 흐름을 쉽게 이해할 수 있도록 설명하는 크리에이터입니다. 그는 주로 비트코인과 탈중 앙화의 미래, 미국 및 글로벌 금융시장 분석, 연준의 금리 정책 등에 대한 주제를 다루고 비트코인을 단순한 투자 수단을 넘어 금융 시스템의 대안으로 보고 있습니다. 이런 그가 미국 정부의 계획 아래 거대한 비트코인 펌프가 있을 수 있다고 얘기합니다.
Okay, so at the center of all this, we have one man working inside the government, and that is Howard Lutnik. Now, most people don't know who he is, but if you do know, you probably know he's the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald. It's an old school Wall Street institution. But what they don't know is that he's also the current U.S. Commerce Secretary, meaning he's not just playing the game. He's not just in Wall Street trying to play along. He's actually in the U.S. government writing the rules. So that's Howard Lutnik. Now, his company is Cantor Fitzgerald. So let's bring this over. As I said, this is an old school Wall Street firm, and Cantor Fitzgerald quietly announced a new Bitcoin financing business. So what they want to do is they want to provide financing or liquidity in the Bitcoin space, specifically for borrowing against your Bitcoin. So they have a $2 billion fund that they've set up to finance people that want to borrow against their Bitcoin, which is great because, as I always say all the time, don't sell your Bitcoin, borrow against it. And that's exactly what they're doing. They've announced they have $2 billion of liquidity for Bitcoin, and let's go ahead and bring Bitcoin over so we have this on our game board as well. So here we have Lutnik, the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, bringing in $2 billion of new liquidity entering the system without triggering any supply-demand metrics, and then we have Bitcoin right here. So we're starting to see how this is shaping up. Now, as I said, Lutnik is in the government. Now, before he was just part of Wall Street, but now he's part of Wall Street and he's in the government, and he's writing the policy in order to do this. It's a book right out of Wall Street's financial engineering playbook. Now, Cantor Fitzgerald is an old-school Wall Street investment firm. They've invested into many things, like, for example, over here, a very controversial company you might have heard quite a bit about, Tether. Now, Tether is a US dollar stablecoin. It's the oldest US dollar stablecoin, and it's been rumored for years and years and years and years and years to be behind Bitcoin pumping and all of that. I've never believed any of that. That's a whole nother subject. But Tether is the largest US dollar stablecoin company, and they hold over 83,000 Bitcoin. Now, who owns a big piece of them? Well, that would be, of course, Cantor Fitzgerald. Here we have over here, Cantor Fitzgerald owning about 5% of Tether. So Lutnik owns Cantor Fitzgerald, the CEO. They have now launched Bitcoin products, and they also own 5% of Tether over here. Okay, so we're starting to see how this whole thing shapes out. Now, why would this legacy Wall Street firm buy into the biggest stablecoin printer in the entire world? Well, probably because they know exactly where this is headed. All right, now another big investment that Cantor Fitzgerald has made is in this company, Strategy. You might have heard of them, formerly MicroStrategy. They've gone ahead and changed their name because they're all in Bitcoin now. Now, at this point, we know that Cantor Fitzgerald took a massive investment into Strategy. We don't know exactly how much ownership, about $1 billion just in Q4 of 2024, so very recent. So if you think Strategy is not a good play, well, you might want to go talk to Lutnik because he just put $1 billion in last quarter. He obviously understands something about strategy that we don't. So now we have Lutnik inside the US government, CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, making massive investments, $1 billion investment in strategy, $600 million investment into Tether, because they know exactly what's going on. But here's where things even get more shocking. As Commerce Secretary, Lutnik is working with the Treasury and the White House economic advisors to build not one, but two government-level Bitcoin programs. First of all, they are building a U.S. sovereign wealth fund. of which potentially Lutnik will be in charge of. So Lutnik now will be directing the US government to be investing money as part of a US sovereign wealth fund. Now, what do you think that Lutnik might advise the US sovereign wealth fund to buy? Well, if you're looking at this web, you might think Bitcoin, and you'd probably be right. The other plan that the government has put together is a U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve. And of course, what would they be buying specifically? Well, it says it right in the name, and that would be Bitcoin as well. So now we have Lutnik, CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, making billion-dollar investments into Strategy and into Tether, and as well as creating a $2 billion product around Bitcoin. At the same time, working inside the government to get the government to buy Bitcoin for both the U.S. Sovereign Wealth Fund and a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Now, what would the goal of all this be? Well, of course, if you can get the government to make it budget neutral, meaning that they don't spend any more money from taxes, then the direct cost to the public is none. But let's be real here. That's government code for financial engineering. But what do we really get here? Well, we get a man with power in both government and finance. We get a $1 trillion firm issuing Bitcoin-backed leverage. We get two of the biggest whales in crypto standing behind it. And we have a government quietly positioning itself to become Bitcoin's biggest holder. Now look, this isn't some dream. This isn't some fragmented movement. This is a Bitcoin flywheel machine, a feedback loop machine, if you will. So how does this machine actually work, besides obviously putting all these pieces together? Well, what happens is, number one, is we get a capital injection into Cantor's play. So by Cantor Fitzgerald working with Wall Street and allowing Wall Street to bring that liquidity into the market without having to sell their Bitcoin, we have all this new capital entering the market. Now, all that new capital entering the market boosts their buying power without increasing the supply. So if we can do that without increasing the supply, that pushes the price up. That puts upward pressure on the price. But that's just the beginning. Step number two is then the market activity starts to surge. So all that fresh leverage, all that demand starts flooding in. Now we have traders, we have funds, we have whales starting to use borrowed capital to accumulate even more Bitcoin. Because of course, they're all expecting the price to rise. Now this increased buying activity pushes prices higher, just like we saw during previous bull runs, except for this time, the liquidity is coordinated from the top. Okay, the third part, step three, is we have major stakeholders starting to profit. And so as Bitcoin starts going up, we have companies here like Strategy holding 500,000 Bitcoin now. We have companies like Tether owning 84,000 Bitcoin, seeing the value of their holdings explode. Imagine as Bitcoin goes from 120, 150, 200, and MicroStrategy, or now Strategy, owns 500,000 of them. Now remember, as the value of their holdings goes up, so does their equity. And Cantor Fitzgerald owns both. They own Bitcoin and they own the company's equity. And so as the company's equity and their valuation goes up, then Cantor Fitzgerald gets, shall we say, a double dip. Now, step number four is institutional endorsement. So here's where it starts getting really interesting. You see, when the government, through the U.S. Sovereign Wealth Fund and the U.S. Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, as the government adoption enters the cycle through two potential moves, through this budget neutral strategy, meaning they're just reallocating money. But what it does is it creates this massive buy side demand. And more importantly, what it does is it signals Bitcoin is now a strategic national asset. What does that mean? Well, basically, when the US signals full institutional backing of Bitcoin, it's not just the whales piling in anymore. Now it's pensions, it's endowments, it's corporations, it's other nations. And that leads us to step number five, which of course is institutional FOMO. So we have now Wall Street. Let's just bring them in here and let's put them at the middle. Now we have institutional FOMO. Now we have created a system that allows them to be okay putting money in. With the government backing of this, they start piling in, which then continues to feed the flywheel. They buy more, they tap into Fitzgerald's debt. They get the debt, they bring more liquidity to market. The buying pushes the price up without bringing new supply to market, which then brings the valuation of Bitcoin up. Then companies like MicroStrategy or Strategy and Tether see the valuation of their holdings go up as well as their stock go up at the same time, and we have a perfect flywheel. The momentum attracts capital, The capital means more demand means more leverage equals higher prices, and the cycle spins again and again. This is the flywheel going round and round and round. And the faster it spins, the faster it goes up. Now, this isn't a hype cycle, right? This is a coordinated system of leverage. A coordinated system of leverage, legitimacy, and liquidity. That's why I'm calling this a Bitcoin flywheel machine, and it's already in motion. Now, let's talk about what this means for you. Because if you're holding Bitcoin or you're thinking about buying Bitcoin, this changes everything, right? This isn't retail FOMO. This isn't another hype wave. This is state level game theory. This is financial infrastructure being built under your feet. Let me pull it up here, of the 50-year cycle. So this 50-year cycle I reference all the time is our blueprint to understanding this. So in this 50-year, what I call a quantum wave investment cycle, we have 4 distinct phases. We can see in phase number 1, which we've been in, this first 10 years is what we call the eruption phase. And this is where retail money rushes in. This would be from 2010 to 2020. Then from 2020 to 2030, we have what's called the frenzy phase. Now you can see from this green arrow, this is where we're at right here. It's important to understand this. Now, the reason why it's important to understand this is because these 4 distinct phases give us this blueprint, this roadmap of where we're at. If we look at it from another way, we can see this first part right here, again, was the retail eruption phase. This is where you and I bought a bunch. We got to front run the governments. We saw the altcoin explosion. But right now, from 2020 to 2030, right in this big part of the move here is the institutional frenzy phase. This is where institutions, where the Wall Street institutions, where the governments, the sovereigns start to frenzy in. This is where the big money is made. And if you understand the playbook, you know how to invest through it. Now, this kind of coordinated leverage and demand, it doesn't lead to 20% gains. It leads to multiples. It leads to a full-blown Bitcoin supply shock in the middle of an adoption wave with government signaling right behind it. Now, that's when you stop measuring growth in percentages, you start thinking about it in exponentials. It also means you have to stop investing in the rear view mirror. That means you have to stop thinking about the past. You have to stop thinking about how expensive things are based off of the past. So, yeah, but Bitcoin used to be 10 cents and $10 and $100 and $1,000 and yeah, that's in the past. What we want to be doing is investing in the windshield. We want to be thinking about the future, thinking about things where things are going. And by understanding the cycles, you can follow the exact same playbook.
마크 모스의 말을 요약하자면 미국 상무장관이자 월스트리트 거물인 하워드 루트닉이 비트코인 역사상 최대 규모의 상승장을 설계하고 있고 미국 정책과 더불어 월스트리트까지 연결해 비트코인이 어떻게 상승할 건지 그리고 현재 비트코인의 흐름에 대해서 얘기하고 있는데요. 그는 경제 흐름을 역사적 관점에서 해석하려는 시도가 꾸준한 만큼 비트코인의 50년 주기와 더불어 현재 우리는 기관들이 매수를 하는 시기라고 얘기합니다. 우리는 객관적인 시각으로 투자를 해야 하고 지금 당장만 보고 투자할 게 아니라 미래를 보고 투자를 해야겠죠. 010-2472-0429 전화번호로 탈개미 적어서 문자 보내주시면 2025년 비트코인과 코인 시장에 대한 분석, 정보들 공유해드리겠습니다. 현재 우리에게 중요한 것은 이러한 정보를 어떻게 활용할 것인가입니다. 지금까지 영상 시청해주셔서 감사하고요. 다음에 더 좋은 영상으로 찾아뵙겠습니다. 감사합니다.